here. We had our own idea. Good.
Hey, where's my script? Where's my face? All right. Good morning, everyone. It's a beautiful Monday. Even though it's raining, that's okay because it is still gorgeous. First of all, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Budget and Finance Committee meeting for Monday, June 2nd, 2025. This meeting is now called to order. It's now 10:05 a.m. And first of all, I want to start off with introducing my committee staff, Trustee A, Paul, hi, Ryan, and Crane. Hi, hey, Crane. Yeah, Crane's here. Crane will be heading up the tech side of our meeting today. And also, I'd like to introduce my one and only Vice Chair, John Wahehe Jr. One and only, yes. How are you going to go with that? All right, this time, Paul, I'd like for you to roll call, please. One and only.
Trustee Ahuna. Trustee Akaka. Trustee Akina.
Aloha mai kako.
Trustee Galuteria.
Yep.
Trustee Lindsay. Trustee Kahele.
Present.
Trustee Souza. Vice Chair Wahehe.
Present.
Chair Lapa. 7.
Oh, are you seeing me? Oh, hi, yes, present. It's just that my computer screen is off, so I was trying to get. Okay, at this time, I'd like to remind our trustees once again to turn on your microphone or take yourself off mute if you're on Zoom when you want to speak, so that, and please speak into your microphones that records properly for our video recording purposes of this meeting. And for public testimonies, the following rules apply so that we are all respectful of everyone wanting to participate. Public testimony should be limited to matters listed only on the agenda and will occur prior to any listed item's conclusion or vote. If you begin to address other issues not on today's meeting agenda, we will call you out of order and direct you to limit your testimony to what's listed on the agenda. Your testifier's mic will be unmuted when it is your turn to testify. If you're not audible, you'll be muted and the next testifier will be called. You will have 5 minutes to say your testimony about the issues at hand. And if you go over, or if not, we will give you a heads up at 4 minutes and 30 seconds to wrap up your testimony. Please log off after you're testifying. Pohai, do we have any testifiers today for for our presentation?
There are no testifiers at this time.
All right, mahalo. At this time, I'd like to call upon our kapuhana, Stacy Ferreira, all right, and to announce her administrative staff that's joining us this morning. Go ahead, Stacy.
Mahalo, Chair, Vice Chair, Trustees. Joining us today in person, we have Chief Operating Officer Kehal Pu'u, Chief Financial Officer Ramona Hinck, Endowment Director Ryan Lee, Financial Analyst Grace Chen, Interim Corporation Counsel Everett Ota, Senior Director of Strategy and Implementation Elena Farden, Director of Human Resources Corey Nakamoto, Director of Communications Bill Brennan, and IT Systems Engineer and Administrator Arlene Aguinaldo. And if I may, Chair,
Yes, of course.
I'd like to ask our new trustee aide to come to the table so she may introduce herself and say hello to
Oh,
the
yes, of
trustees.
course, please.
Please come join
gracious.
us. Can you show her how to, might want to turn the camera. Oh, you can come right here
Yes, right up there.
and then turn on.
Aloha.
Aloha everyone, my name is Pohailani Ke Aloha. I'm excited to be here and part of this ohana.
And the trustee that you will be supporting?
Chair Hulu Lindsay.
Mahalo, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you so much for introducing yourself for our new trustee's aide. At this time, although we have no action items today, we're going to move on to a presentation done by our Administrator and CEO, Stacy Ferreira. This is going to be an item A presentation by administration, revised OHA budget, Biennium budget for fiscal year 26 and fiscal year 2027. Status update following the budget briefings that we've held over the past 2 weeks of May 14th through the 27th. Now, Kapuhana, go ahead.
Mahalo, Chair. trustees. Today Grace and I are gonna take you through two different documents. The first document is the administration's recommendations to balance the OHA fiscal year 26-27 biennium budget. And then Grace will take us through our personnel details as it stands today. So everything that we're going to talk about is a point in time. And again, this is just going to be a status update. There will be recommendations made, and it will be the desire of the administration to get some further guidance from the board on how best to proceed with balancing the budget. So if we may put up the slide. So the slide that we're going to be taking a look at is significantly different than the one that was posted on Friday. And that's because Grace has been working furiously over the weekend in trying to update all of the budget numbers. She's not 100% complete as of yet, but she's, I would say, maybe about 85, 90% there. And so this is a point in time based off of the work that she has done over the weekend. So what I'd like to do is just to orient everybody to this particular graphic. If we could remove that little toolbox that's being displayed. Mahalo. Okay, so from left to right, on the left in the green is what I'm calling OHA's operating budget. And the numbers that you see reflected there are basically all of the OHA operational requests to date. And what I've tried to do is detail the spending limit. So going from top to bottom, our spending limit as it pertains to our current 4.4 ceiling or our spend limit. And if we were to increase it to 5%, that number is then reflected. And you'll see that we have our budget numbers detailed over the biennium. So 2 fiscal years are articulated. So Grace is reminding me that I should share with you that when we're talking about OHA operations budget numbers, we're only talking about core. So this doesn't include all of the non-core sources of funding that comes from from the real estate portfolio. So just strictly funding, sources of funds that come from the Native Hawaiian Trust Fund, our legislative appropriation of $3 million, and the spending limit. So again, at 4.4. And so I'm just going to take you through the left-hand side, and then we can further the conversation with the blue box on the right after. So right now, our spending limit currently is at 4.4. So for fiscal year 26, that equates to $49,436,652 that we can spend in FY26 on operations, and $51,598,221 in fiscal year 27. So you see there's a slight increase over the fiscal years. Now, if we were to entertain, and this is one of the recommendations for helping to achieve a balanced budget, would be to raise our spending limit up to 5% based on OHA policy. By raising the spending limit to 5%, that provides us an additional $2.5 million towards our spending limit. So raising our spend limit in fiscal year 26 to $51,936,652. And in fiscal year 27, quite significant jump to $54,098,221. So let's just keep that on top of mind, because that we cannot exceed those numbers, right, by policy. So let's continue down to the next section. So as of 4/30, so April 30th, 2025, our total budget request of the administration brought to the board for fiscal year 26 was $46,850,825. And in fiscal year 27, it was a request of $48,268,010. Then we entered into budget briefings. So our first budget briefings, we kicked off in May. And when we paused at May 28th, 2025, the additional budget request was $5,646,806. And in fiscal year 27, there was an additional budget request of $4,256,806. $232,187. So I just want to remember that I want to anchor us all back into that conversation, those conversations from those budget briefings, that this was a conversation between the board and the different PIA directors, the CEO team, on not only requests that we came in with initially, but additional requests that were discussed at the table. So there were requests made by the board to consider adding additional considerations to different line items as the PIA came forward and talked about what they were planning to do in terms of programs and services. And so there were many additions that the board brought forward. And then there were also requests that the PIA directors and the CEO team also brought forward in those discussions. So the numbers that you're seeing reflected there are a combination of both administrative and board discussions. Now, highlighted right under that in gray, there it says non-OHA CIP requests. And so what I'm noting here is there were 3 additional projects that were brought forward in the BOT budget request of $2,550,000 for fiscal year 26 and $2,375,000 in fiscal year 27. Now I'm highlighting that because I would like to have a discussion with the board on how we extract that request, and we consider that as a grant in aid, as a non-OHA asset CIP. And we can have that discussion after, but I still want to note it because it's part of the overall budget presentation. And so we are still considering those numbers until the board is able to have a discussion on whether or not we want to extract the non-OHA asset CIP requests. So you'll still see those numbers included. So on 6-2, on 6-2-25, there were, after all the conversations that occurred, we came back to the board another point in time, which is today. And after all of the budget crunching that Grace has done over the weekend, we have new totals. So I want the board to know that, you know, the administration took into consideration where the requests from the board was to either reduce or to add. And so you will see that the additional requests have actually been reduced from 528 to 62, from 5.6 million to 4 million for FY26. And if in FY27, you'll see a reduction from the 528 point in time meeting, from 4.2 to today to 3.2. Okay, so if we go down to the next row, that darker green row, in 528.25, our request total was $52,497,631 for FY26 and $52,500,197 in FY27. So again, always comparing it, I would like trustees always to compare that request total to the very top line of our spending limit. And then today, we are looking at a request total of $53,636,103 for FY26, and FY27, a request of $53,365,904. So if we could move down to the next section. If we look at what the administration came in with initially, on 430, we were very conservative. I was very conservative with our directors and the CEO team. I asked them to please come in with a budget that we felt was streamlined, got us you know, to a place where we felt that we could deliver on programs and services, but also be cognizant that we still had not, in the budget, we did not have salary figures, right? And we didn't have the ad hoc salary numbers. So we wanted to make sure that we could balance our budget and leave room for additional requests that came from the ad hoc salary committee, as well as the BOT. We still, at that point in time, did not have the BOT budget numbers. So again, being very cognizant of all of these additional resources that were going to be requested, we wanted to make sure we left some room for those additions. So on 5/26, based off of the 4.4 spend ceiling limit, we would have come in with a deficit of $3 million, $3,060,979 in FY26, and in FY27, a deficit of $901,976. And this, now if we were to minus out the non-OHA CIP, that would have brought our deficit down to 519,929,000. I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses. May I borrow this?
No.
510.
You want to blow this?
Maybe, yeah, sorry. It's so small and the red's a little harder to read. Okay. In fiscal year 27, however, our deficit would have been $901,976. And if we took out the non-OHA CIP, we would now be in the positive at $1,473,024. So moving down to 528.25, if we were to raise the spending ceiling to 5%, and again, raising the ceiling to 5% means adding up to an additional $2.5 million that we could spend. So when you take that additional $2.5 million into consideration, that means that we would be only in a deficit of $560,979, but we would be in positive in fiscal year 27 at $1,598,024. So if we minused out the non-OHA CIP, that would then take us into the black, positive $2,039,021. And in fiscal year 27, it would be a positive of $3,973,024. Point in time today at 6/2/25, our deficit, if we remain at the 4.4 current spending ceiling, we would be in deficit of $4,199,451 in fiscal year 26, and a deficit in fiscal year 27 of $1,767,683. If we took out the non-OHA CIP at the current 4.4 spend ceiling, we would be in a deficit of $1,649,451 and positive in fiscal year 27 at $607,317. If we were to raise the ceiling to 5%, we would still be in a deficit of $1,699,151. And in fiscal year 27, we would be in a positive of $732,317. If we are to remove the non-OHA CIP, we would be in a positive of $850,849. And in fiscal year 27, we would be in a positive of $3,107,317. So to achieve a balanced budget, Chair and trustees, I'm recommending that we raise the spend limit from 4.4% up to 5%, which adds $2.5 million to each fiscal year. I'm also recommending that we remove the non-OHA asset CIP from OHA's operational expenses and budget separately as discretionary grants and aid if deemed allowable by the BOT. I'd also like to recommend that we consider additional funding for vetted programs and services already brought before the board, or consider funding new strategically aligned programs and services by 6/12. Of course, anything new would also have to come before the board for discussion. By following these recommendations to achieve a balanced budget, I believe that we can meet the June 30th, 2025 Budget and Finance and BOT ratification deadlines. With that said, Chair, if I can take a little bit more time to talk about the right-hand side.
Sure.
If we could scroll over. So what I've done in my recommendations, calling out the removal of the OHA asset, the removal of the non-OHA asset CIP. This would be following the same practice that the state legislature follows, and the rationale would be as follows. Separating out the CIP funding request allows the BOT to have a standalone budget discussion and prevents any delays in the ratification of OHA's operational budget. Now, by migrating this non-OHA asset CIP to its own budget allocation and discussion, it mitigates the agency's risk and liability and ensures fairness and transparency. This allows the BOT time for policy and process review, discussion and development and decision-making. It allows the BOT time for CIP projects due diligence, review, discussion, and decision-making, and identifying a source of funding for these large infrastructure projects. And furthermore, there's no deadline if we separate this out as its own action item. Now, the reason for separating out the non-OHA asset CIP, and similar to the legislature, when they are creating the state budget, they do have a CIP portion included into their operations budget, but all CIP that are included in the state's operating budget are assets that are owned by the state. Example, school facilities, parks, office buildings. They're all assets that are amortized, that are revenue generating, that require repair and maintenance of the state budget. Similarly, our OHA operations would account for the same things. They would only include our OHA assets and the repair and maintenance of those assets. It is best practice that we would separate out anything that is non-OHA assets and create a separate funding mechanism. So in the case of the legislature, what they do is they have discretionary funds that they call a grants in aid process that we could mirror. And the reason that it's discretionary is because they use the grants in aid process as a release valve for the state when there is a surplus. And so, because you don't want to just keep accumulating and accumulating money, you want to disperse those funds to community. But it really depends on how much money that the state has in a surplus as discretionary. So with that said, OHA does have discretionary funds. At this point in time, it's approximately $5 million. However, because that discretionary money is not a part of the fiscal year 26-27 biennium, it really should be discussed separately from our operating budget. With that said, there needs to be additional discussion because that discretionary money, that $5 million, is right now being held as carryover funds. There needs to be additional discussion by the board to get additional guidance on how carryover funds would like to be used by this body. What are the priorities? Because right now, it is not very specific on the use of carryover funds. And we might want to also have, or I would recommend that we have a discussion on those carryover funds being put into the emergency, is Everett here? Everett, the emergency funds? Fiscal stabilization, mahalo. Put that into the fiscal stabilization funds because we need to also take into consideration that any additional funds, say if we use the carryover 5 million, that now becomes part of our overall spend, which will far exceed the 5% spend by policy. But once you put the monies into the fiscal stabilization fund, that is exempt. It exempts us from the spend limit. It's not included as part of the spending limit. So there's a lot of conversation that this board needs to have around one, just the non-OHA asset CIPs that were brought before the board. I did request from board members to please provide due diligence so that I could forward that to the board for consideration. I only received due diligence information regarding the Kuananakoa gym and hall renovation, and that was distributed to the board. I did not receive any additional information regarding the other projects. So I think that is a compelling reason. Right now? Oh, okay. So, yeah, so I wasn't able to distribute it in time. So I can forward that post-meeting. But essentially, the discretionary funds, the $5 million that is currently in our carryover would be my recommendation for further discussion if the board wants to use it for non-OHA assets or other spending priorities. But again, I think that's going to be a much longer discussion, and we don't have that amount of time, as we are looking at a very short runway to approve our OHA operations budget. Mahalo, Chair.
Thank you very much, trustees. Open for discussion at this time. I believe trustee Souza, go ahead.
Hello, Madam Chair. Malo Capuano. Referring to the spend limit as 4.4%, and if we wanted to accommodate this year's budget, we have to raise it to 5. I thought we were authorized up to 5%.
Yes, we are. And so we have, when we initially budgeted, we budgeted at 4.4, being conservative.
I see.
Again, not really being able to account for numbers that were coming from the BOT side, not having, you know, the ad hoc salary. And we knew it was going to be a large amount. So we budget conservatively and we raise accordingly once we get more information.
So without the carryover of the $5 million, would we be at the 5%? Would we be within?
Correct. So if you look at the 6.225 surplus deficit towards the bottom,
Right.
if we take out the non-OHA CIP, we are in the black. We actually have $850,849 to appropriate for fiscal year 26, and we would have $3,107,317 to appropriate in fiscal year 27. So that's excellent. That's an excellent position to be
That's a
in.
big jump.
Yeah. So basically, the talks of the $5 million right now wouldn't have to be applied to this.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Any other, go ahead, yes. Any other discussions, trustees?
Chair,
Oh, yes, trustee Hulu, go ahead.
I just want to commend an administration for this presentation and Grace for all her hard work. I think Stacy's proposal is an excellent one, where we would be able to approve our operating budget and meet all the deadlines. And then we can go through the CRP side at our leisure, because there's no deadline on that, and have a full and free discussion. So I support that recommendation from administration. Thank you.
Mahalo. Any other discussion, trustees?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead, Kai.
So Grace, our top line number is 51,936,652. Is that correct? So,
Hello, trustees. Good morning.
Good morning.
The line you're referencing is on line 2, on row 2.
Yep.
Spending limit 5%. Yes, that's so administration can use up to 5% on the Native Hawaiian Trust Fund calculations, and it comes out to 51,936,652.
okay, so we can, we could be at 4.7%, 4.8%, it doesn't matter, right?
That's right. Yes.
And then why the significant jump, like 2.5 million jump in FY 27 to 54,98,221, Ryan?
Okay, so the question is from how the
Just
difference.
the difference?
Yeah, 54 million to 51 million over the from fiscal 27 to fiscal 26.
I guess what is Ryan projecting in the Native Hawaiian Trust Fund's performance? That would
Yes, Ryan, can you please come up? I'm just going to clarify some things for us.
basically, it's about a little over $2 million increase.
Correct.
How did you get to that number?
So basically, it's based on the spending formula. because we're capturing higher market values. Given that, 27, the year cutoffs, right? So we're capturing the last 5 years of market value, which is typically higher with the 27 calculation versus 26. And that's based on projected return targets, as well as capturing the increase given the PLT settlement, right? So I believe it entered the Native Hawaiian Trust Fund back in 2023. So we're capturing an increase in the market value from that.
What happens if, next year, or when would you reevaluate the performance of our portfolio to know if we have this $2.1 million increase, or is it less and we need to do a budget
Realignment.
alignment?
Yeah, realignment.
Right. So just based on the spending formula, it's a smoothing, right? So it allows for more certainty in terms of the budget planning, because there's a smoothing effect that's happening. So there wouldn't be much changes to it. We're going to spend based on the spending. The spending form itself would accommodate any volatility. So we can take a look at it to make sure we're on track, but I do not believe there would be a lot of changes based off of that.
Okay. I guess can I keep going?
Yeah, go ahead.
So Grace and Stacy, if you go into the budget briefings and you have the 528.25 number, so this is under the FY26 column. So you have the 5.6, which includes everything, right? Including the Board of Trustee parties. And then you reduce out the 2.5, and now we have 4 million, right? 4,008,678, or 8,678. So that's a 6225 number.
No,
4,008,678.
no, Chair. So if you want to see what it looks like with the non-OHA CIP minused out, you would go down to that last section under 528, where our deficit goes from 3 million now to 510,000.
I'm not looking for the deficit. I'm looking for
Right.
the additional budget requests. Which
Okay,
is
so yeah,
your,
we would
which is your,
minus out the 2.5 from the 5.6 and 2.5 from the 4.
correct, and that 5.6 minus 2.5 equals your $4 million, right? Is that what that number is?
Oh, yeah, I think you're right.
Is that correct? I mean, I'm pretty sure it's
Yeah, it is.
correct.
You're right.
Okay, so my question is, what is that?
What is that?
What are
that-
all of those additional budget requests?
Yeah, so those were,
Are you gonna break those down for us here?
oh, yes, so that would be in the more detailed budget. So Grace she has program and travel. Go ahead, you can explain.
So, yes, trustee, I'm sorry that, it's not complete yet. It's, like I said, the administration was still giving me numbers up to last Friday, so I was working over the weekend. Like I said, like Stacy said, I'm 90% done. So what I have is that the worksheets that you've been accustomed to seeing, I'll be adding extra columns, taking off, you'll be seeing what the adjusted column is, it's just a value, and it increases for each of the, and the column, and it increases from what was the original request and what those requests are. So these will all be summarized in the new set that I'll be working toward and getting that to you today.
So let's talk about that now. If you have 90% of those things, Stacy, why don't you start with the big numbers, start with personnel and fringe, start working our way down to that.
Yeah, point in time. So do you have the other document, personnel?
So the document that was distributed, this one was, as you can see, it was prepared on May 28th. The figure I have today is different.
That's
and
fine.
it's as of yesterday. However, it's on my laptop. And I can put it up there to show you if you want to see it, but it'll be, like I said, for those.
I think that's important because what the board needs to know is of the $5.6 million in additional budget requests that came in on 5/28, which includes the additional PIA requests that we went through all the budget hearings, right? If we put aside the board priorities and we just focused on the $4 million number, these are the decisions that the administration made based on the PIA hearings to include in the proposed budget. We need to know what those decisions are so that we can make final decisions on what stays in and what stays out. So we should talk about that,
Yeah.
right? That's what this briefing is for.
Yeah, absolutely. And you will have that budget detail. So can you bring up, because you've been working over the weekend, can you at a high level talk about what are some of the major increases, where things were recalibrated?
Okay. I already prepared some handouts that you'll be getting later today. It's a lot. If I were to discuss it today and without the handout in front of you, it'll be a lot of figures. But what I did was I took one of the handouts shows what fiscal 25 as is at 100%. Then this one handout has that. Then at the same time, it also compares what it is for fiscal 26 at 100% with an updated org chart. With that, then you'll see the impact, the fiscal impact of the salary commission reports, both for the trustees and as well as for the personnel, and as well as for the increase in the headcount. Using that as a base, I have a separate page which shows that where I have it as a start, the version that you had in front of you that was on as of April 30th, I started with that as the first column showing us, and for that one I had placeholders. I made some assumptions, and one of the assumptions is include a 7% vacancy. So I use that as my beginning value, and then I started incorporating, for example, the ones I just said, if the fiscal 20, I'm just talking about fiscal 26, using that, what you were familiar with last time, I showed what it is fully loaded, 100%, no vacancies. So you can see if everybody's on board from day one to the last day, and we're at 166. What you saw 153 last time, we're now at 166 across the board. And I can tell you for that one, fully loaded, 24 million, 24.9 million, close to 25 million. The number that I had for the 7% was 20.7 million. So 20.7 to 24.9 if everybody's on board from day one. And then we increased our headcount to 166. Using that, knowing that it's a lot of work for HR, for administration, and then to find the right people at the right time, then I went to all the directors and asked them to give me their projections on when they would be hiring, when they'll be coming on board. So I call that the prorated personnel, in that some are already in place, and those staff in place, those will be hired by July 1st. They'll start on July 1st. Those vacancies that, takes a little bit of time to fill, I have them coming in at Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. Some may not even be filled on day one. So I would have a placeholder. So then that you'll see on the second column, what it is with the prorated. Then seeing that and then finally, the third scenario is that we're now at 26% vacancy. Is it realistic to assume that we'll have 0 vacancy? So I took someplace that's in the middle, and assuming that people there might be situations, and I applied a 10% vacancy on top of that. So starting with 100%, using the prorated on board rate, and then applying 10%, I'm now at, for fiscal 26, 20,654,000, and that is for all of OHA, total operating budget for the personnel. So my point is that my original my original placeholders were 20.7. Today, using that scenario 3, we're 20.65. It's actually a reduction of 45,000. there were other assumptions I have, and like I said, I included I'll be including in my report, the assumptions I made.
So I think what's important is if we're proposing to go from 152 to 166.
Yes,
What are those new positions? That is important.
yes.
Outside of the ad hoc salary commission's recommendations, are there any proposed pay increases to any other current personnel at OHA?
Yes, there is.
Who are they?
I also have that in my report.
Stacy?
Yes, thank you, Chair. There will be, because, we are posting positions like our corp counsel, our CFO, Senior Director of Human Resources. So because these positions the job descriptions are being relooked at, and they're going to be, again, looked at in terms of market. What we've used, what I'm using, and I've discussed with Corey, to be in alignment with how the our salary ad hoc looked at government salaries, the SRs. We want to make sure that if our benchmarking is going to be using state of Hawaii benchmarking, then we're going to do the same with the salary commission reports for the executive branch. And so what we did was we looked at the current salary commission report, and we looked at the various positions to see what would be, I guess, comparable to the positions that we are going to be posting. And because the salary commission report, they only have one number. It's, an annual salary number. And because we do ranges here, what Corey and I did was we looked at that number, the salary number that was provided at whatever that deputy director tier was, and we created a salary range by backing into that final number. So when we looked at the salary commission's report, there's an increase of 4% year over year, over, I think it was a 6-year period. And so using that, their 2026 number, we backed into it 4%, I think over a 4-year, 5-year period, and that gave us a range. So, so we're looking at again benchmarking all new positions that are being going to be recruited to that, and then also our COO and our endowment director positions were inherited, and so. So our senior director of strategy and implementation, our senior director of Hawaiian culture affairs were new positions, so they were benchmarked with, at the market at the time. Only the COO and the endowment director were positions that they went into the old, the current rate that we have, and they're under market. And so we would like to make sure that our senior leaders are also taken into consideration and benchmarked accordingly.
So the new positions that or the ones we're trying to fill right now, right? Our CFO position, which is a vital position.
Correct.
The general counsel position, that's probably another vital position. Our land director.
Senior director of land, yes.
These are the ones that we are setting potential new salary rates based on
Correct.
a band referencing the state salary commission's recommendations.
Thank you for asking that, because there's actually a caveat. So there's 2 positions that we've just talked about that would not align to the current executive branch salaries. And that's because the nature of the job, both the endowment director and the senior director of real estate, the market compensation, the state doesn't even get into the parking lot of the ballpark. And so knowing that we want to retain excellent talent, we want to recruit excellent talent, we need to be at least in the parking lot of the ballpark. And so those are discussions that you and I are having. I'm also having it with chair of the ad hoc salary committee to figure out what is that sweet spot. So I know that there's also been consultation with others who have similar positions that are very much doing similar types of work, that their portfolio may not, our portfolio may not be as big as some of the folks that we're consulting with. However, that doesn't negate the fact that we still need to be competitive, and we need to really re-look at those two particular positions based off of where we want this organization to be. I did have conversations with Grace, and so I'm glad we're talking about this, because that's an important detail. What I've asked Grace to do, so similar to the endowment director, that compensation does not come from the core budget. That comes from non-core. So the monies that pay for the endowment director's salary comes from the Native Hawaiian Trust Fund. So that's not considered with our core budget. Similarly, I would like our senior director of land or real estate to also do a 50-50 split between operations, our core budget. So half of that salary be attributed to core, and half of that salary be contributed from non-core real estate. Because I think that really creates an incentive for performance on the real estate side. Mahalo.
So then to further clarify, and maybe this is a Ryan question, if I'm looking at the budget tables, it was proposed that the budget request would be $402,443 from the Native Hawaiian Trust Fund to fund your salary and I think maybe one other staff member's position. Is that based on a 4.4% draw? Or is that based on a 5% draw of the Native Hawaiian Trust Fund to fund your unique PAIA?
Yeah, that's not included. It's separate.
I know it's separate, but what is the number based off of? How do you get to 402, 443?
Oh, that's basically the current salary that's before the review, right? So that's just the salary and fringe.
Well, could we draw more from the Native Hawaiian Trust Fund? Like when can we stop? What is the cap from the Native Hawaiian Trust Fund to fund your PAIA?
So when I presented my budget briefing, right? So in terms of the typical expenses that's sort of required to operate investment office. So there was a range, right, from I believe 20 to 35 basis points of the value of the market value of the trust fund. Typically, that's how much you would spend for an investment office, and personnel tends to be a majority of that, with the additional resources such as custody, performance measurement, and so forth. So that's sort of within the budget range for an investment office. And then when it presented the budget briefing, I think we're at close to 18 basis points, so well below sort of that medium within the lower end of that, I would say cost structure.
Does the board have this is just for the other trustees, does the board have a policy of what it would draw down from the Native Hawaiian Trust Fund to fund that PAIA? For example, let's say an endowment counterpart director at Kamehameha Schools gets paid $500,000 a year, and we wanted to match that. Is there a threshold, or has the board discussed what we would want to draw from the Native Hawaiian Trust Fund to fund the endowment director position, subsequent supporting staff? Like, at what point are we out of the range? It's just a question. Trustee Aquino?
Trustee, just as someone who sits at this table, I can report that we have been given presentations on what the draw should be for the Native Hawaiian Trust Fund to be stable and healthy. And when I arrived here at OHA in 2016, it was about 4.4%, and it was being exceeded. Now, I'd like to refer back to Ryan, what policy we have arrived at as to the cap, the limit for spending a Native Hawaiian Trust Fund. That's part of our policy.
Right. I mean, that is the spending policy up to 5%.
But
Right,
that's
right.
for the
Well,
core.
That's
That's to fund the core budget.
That's to fund the core budget.
I'm talking your budget.
Correct. So within my budget, I don't think there has been established. I think in terms of the past,
Zero.
Yeah. We don't relate it to particular budgets.
Yeah, we don't take money off of the point trust fund.
Yeah, we do. We do it.
Beyond the 5% spending limit, leave it all in.
No. We use it to fund his pile.
I would say historically, because the Native Hawaiian Trust would operate within this manager structure. So there were investment expenses tied to that. That was sort of the cost of managing the investment portfolio, right? So there was never a discussion,
That's what he's asking.
right? So it's just more the internal costs of managing the investments.
Are you? Okay. I think I know what Kai's asking. Oh gosh, is there a limit to, is it based on basis points to how much money we have to fund the functions of the investment? Is that where and that's where your salary comes out of?
That's correct. So when I presented the
Well,
budget,
yeah, how many basis points?
I would have to go back to my notes, but when I presented the budget briefing, so I highlighted in terms of typical costs, right, from a small endowment to a large endowment, right? So a $10 million endowment, typically when you look at the fixed costs of managing operations, it tends to be lower than let's say a smaller, right? But again, the dollar size of it, because it's fixed, it's much larger. So as the fund grows in size, your
Right.
expense ratio decreases.
Right, I guess what's the, based on that policy, how much money could we potentially fund, whoever our investment person, like whether it's the endowment office, or if we had an investment officer, how much money would we be allowed to use under that policy to pay that position?
So typically about 20 to 25 basis points is sort of that range, right? So if you want to break it down by personnel costs and for example, like these not like custody costs, that can be broken down, right? But typically personnel would be about half of that.
I guess this is my question. So within the just personnel, right? Yourself, I'm looking at your slide, is an investment analyst position and the executive assistant to the CEO and the endowment director. Those three positions, two, which one? The investment analyst? Okay, so your position and investment analyst is funded from the Native Hawaiian Trust Fund. It does not come out of the core budget, correct?
Correct.
Correct, okay. So when looking at this slide, your spending priorities that talk about institutions like OHA that have anywhere between a 500 million to a $1 billion budget, most models show a staff of between 2 to 4.
Right.
Okay, so we got that. And then this also includes and could include external advisors, right? And
Correct.
you briefed us on that.
Correct.
2 contractors potentially. So the model, whether we're at 15 basis points or 25 to 35 basis points, what I'm trying to figure out is how much money we have in this bucket so that we can have a competitive salary for our endowment director. We can fund the investment analyst position and the external consultants that you need to grow the trust fund from today's market, value of $600 million to $800 million. What type of expertise would we need? And has the board, we've never taken, it sounds like, a position on what that top line number should be. It's based on basis points of what other institutions of this comparable portfolio use.
That's correct, yes.
And based on a 15 basis points and a $500 million portfolio, which we know we have more than that, that number would be $750,000.
Right.
Which we would need to fund the 2 positions plus the external advisors.
Correct, yes.
Okay, I think that would be helpful to break down, because then we could figure out what we could target as a competitive salary for the endowment director.
So
From what you currently are now to what another number may be.
yeah, right. So it's
Trustee Souza?
that's
Oh, I'm
the
sorry.
basis of forming the budget for the investment office.
Well, Madam Chair, and Ryan, I know you discussed this earlier, and we've had conversations in our ILM briefings as well. We're actually between 750 and 1.5 million dollars, considering the size of our trust fund, right? And so that brings us to the 15 basis points, right? Technically, I mean, I heard you mention earlier 18 basis points or something like that. I mean, maybe that's the range we're kind of looking at, right? Based on the amount. But so we're well under the recommended limit, right?
We're at the lower range.
Yeah.
Right. So to be competitive, you want to be at least within
Right.
the median.
So getting back to the chair's question, we have some room to play with in growing your department. Is it? I think what we're trying to shine light on.
That's
right now.
correct.
Yeah, because if you look at the budget tables, and 402,000, what was the number here on page 2 of the original budget tables? And just even if we went with 20 basis points, we would be at $1 million. And if you could give us a budget on $1 million of the 2 personnel positions and the external advisors that would need, whether it's one external advisor or a number of them, I mean, this is a strategic investment in the Native Hawaiian Trust Fund
Correct.
with the desired result of increasing its returns, right? So I think that would be helpful. And that's separate and aside from the core budget that we're talking about here.
So the revised budget will show that, again, it was with the trustee's suggestion that those that are in, that how he expressed the other costs be rolled in and included in this afternoon's budget details. And the total of that for fiscal 26 comes out to $1,048,000. That is 532,000 of contracts, 22,000 of equipment, and I'm using as a placeholder of nearly $500,000 for personnel and fringe for the 2 positions. This is for fiscal 26.
Trustee Wahe?
Thanks. Ryan, you know, if, as we form, this department, is it, and based on the recommendations we got, for that, do you still want to maintain, how do I want to make sure that I don't get misinterpreted. Do you want to maintain the position of the endowment officer? Because, to me, when I think of that, I think of like a guy who helps fundraise or do you want like to have a investment, instead of an endowment director, have an investment officer? Or like,
We can change the title, trustee. Yeah, that's easy to do.
oh, okay.
I think essentially it's, just ensuring that the work that's, expected by this board is occurring.
Trustee Souza?
Follow, Madam Chair. That opens up the conversation, and thanks, Stacy, for shining light on the positions like land director and endowment director, which your title may be different in a couple of months. But anyway, what other positions are we looking at? I know, Stace, we've had conversations, and you brought up the director positions. Which position is it? All directors, and what is the percentage of increase we're looking at? Is that cost of living increase, or is that a bump in pay plus the cost of living that we may be giving them?
So again, I looked at the executive team, and any position that was created new from when I came on is not expected to get any, there's no change. It's only the ones that I inherited that are not at market. And then those positions that have been raised from director to senior director, because now they report directly to me, will see an increase, as well as those that are being recruited for right now. How did you want to talk to about any of your directors that may have seen an increase in their budget, in terms of your budget for personnel? Or dollar amount? Okay. All these changes that we're talking about right now will be in Grace's detailed budget that we will present out to you folks for your review and consideration. And maybe Chair Alapa, I know we have a BOT meeting coming up in, in Maui. Maybe there's an opportunity to dive into some of these questions because right now we're kind of talking about things sort of ad hoc versus having a document that you folks can review and annotate and have a more informed discussion. But I think you were open to having even additional budget meetings, right?
Yes,
Needed?
absolutely, because obviously there's a lot of new numbers coming in and we still have to address them. So naturally, we can't do this in one sitting today. We're going to definitely need to add on maybe perhaps another one. If we can do it in Maui, that would be great. But I'm open for our trustees to consider that. Go ahead.
It's too
trustee.
late for Maui because of the time period.
Okay.
Maui is this week, yeah.
What she's trying to say is that the agenda has already been.
Yeah.
That's right, forgot. Any other discussions, trustee? Yes, Grace, go ahead.
I can tell you, I'm working with HR and producing an updated set of the org chart. So you'll be getting that in this afternoon's packet. On top of that, I already have teed up that you'll see the positions as well as the departments and the positions that they're filling by title. You'll see the changes, how many it is, the new headcount, as well as their personnel budget for each of the departments. So like I said, my information is very granular. It might be an overkill and a lot of information coming your way, but like I said, I'll be available to sit down with you, trustees, to go and review each one of them so that you have a solid understanding of the changes in the org chart.
Yeah, I would greatly appreciate that. We would greatly appreciate that. Go ahead, Stacy.
So Chair Lapa, trustees, again, I just want to bring your attention to your consideration. Once we get these detailed budgets back out to you folks for your review and consideration, we can do we can raise the spend ceiling in 1 year, and we can bring it back down in the second year. So when we're looking at, let's just take 6/2/25, the surplus. If we were to take out the non-OHA CIP, fiscal year 26, we're at an $850,849 surplus.
Right.
So we can, again, the recommendation is we can redeploy those funds, or we can bring down the spend limit to even that out. There's a huge positive, in fiscal year 27 at 3.1 million. Just, we don't necessarily have to reappropriate those out. It's really up to the board, right? I think when you are reviewing it, if there are programs and services that we may want to in fiscal year 27 put additional dollars towards, because we feel that it's going to really create systemic change if we can add more dollars, then we should do that.
Sure, of
But please don't feel constrained by the numbers that are on here. That is up to 5%, right? So again, take that into consideration as you're looking at the revised budgets before you. And again, I will share that, the PIAs really took what the trustees were saying to heart. So if you folks said, add more money, or we should be doing more, or they did, they added those things. So I know that there's going to be a lot of line items that you're going to look at and you're going to be like, why are we spending so much money? Many of these additions were because of the discussions that were had. And there is going to be deference that is paid to this board, right? Because if the board is setting direction and you want to see bigger movement, you want to see larger impact, quicker impact, and we can do that by putting more resources towards that, that's what's going to be reflected in this budget.
Completely agree. Any other trustee? Go ahead.
I guess we'll just wait, Grace, until this afternoon
Yeah.
because we don't know what is in the $4 million budget line in the additional budget requests. We don't know what those ads are. We don't know what you decided to reduce from other PIAs that were presented to us on April 30th. We don't know what you added into those other PIAs. So it's difficult for us to make any decisions until we can see what was in this item here. So that will be today. We'll get the final budget tables. Great. Okay.
Trustee Akaka?
Mahalo. As we're looking at what could be a surplus or deficit and the ceilings that we're working with, I just keep getting reminded in terms of the numbers, the amounts that we are receiving, that we're working off of. So if you're looking at the amounts that we receive from the legislature, from our crown and government lands of our Hawaiian Kingdom, we're getting 21.5 million. Can you imagine if we got at least the very least of what we're supposed to get, which isn't even the true amount, which is 79 million? That's at least 57.5 million difference. So when we talk about systematic change and the limits that we have, I think that we need to take another look at the approach of how we're gonna do things legislatively. We've been doing that consistently. However, I think the messaging that we need to continue throughout the community and at the legislature, this is very key. Mahalo.
Trustee Galutaria?
Thank you, Chair. Just for consistency, since we are in the process of replicating, say, legislative processes, i.e. CIP and such. So just for my clarity, and perhaps some of the board, the stabilization fund that we're referring to today is basically rainy day.
That would be comparable.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, yes, go ahead, Kehal.
Hi, aloha. I just calamite that we don't have the line by line ready, but it was a very quick turnaround. And as Grace shared, all of our directors input their changes all through last week, and then Grace incorporated them all. So I believe she's gonna have a brand new line by line that will show what the original ask was, which you folks already have, and then the adjusted amounts. But just to give you a little bit of an overview of the changes, so it does include personnel, right? We added some positions as well as some salary adjustments. It includes increases and decreases both in programs and contracts. Things like the second floor Suite 200 renovation is now included. That includes the studio for comms, IT enclosure, putting ceilings over our offices on the second floor, and then relocating all of third floor. Yep, also that's on Lori's side, but the elevator repair, some of our programs maybe forgot to add some expenses in, so this was their time to put it in. Some of them held back, like R&E, so they went ahead and put stuff back in based on the discussions that they had here at the table. We also made adjustment for travel, and then what also is included that is not CIP were the non-CIP request that came from BOT last week. So I believe Avaya Ulu is included in here. The Jobsum Partnership funding is also part of this revised budget, the June 2nd budget that you folks will get today. And then the adjustments that were made in travel. We also did make reductions to things like parking, trying to just keep dole for a quarter while we figure out coordination to reduce that for telework. Small contracts and program adjustments here and there. So, so that's just kind of a summary of the changes that happened over the week. And then you folks will get that today. And I'm looking at Grace because I believe she did say you'll see like what came to you last week or the 2 weeks before, and then, the changes that you'll see. So I just want to share that.
Go ahead, Kapohana.
Yeah, I also wanted to note that when you're going through the line by line, you're gonna see what would look like duplication. And there are two instances, there may be more, but the ones that come to mind are the home repair program and Aho Appeal. You'll see that both reflected in the administration's budget as well as the BOT's budget. So the administration came forward with those requests, and then the BOT added to that. So it's not a duplication. However, it may be, out of context, you might think that it is. But certainly those are things that you're going to see when you go through the line by line.
Great, thank you so much. Trustee Hulu?
Yes, I've been I have been hearing that the executive um, group was going to move to the second floor. Why aren't the trustees informed? I don't know what's going on as far as the structure there at Nalamakukui. Can you please explain why the move? What's going to happen with the third floor? What's this all about?
Yeah, mahalo, Chair Emerita. So about a month and a half, 2 months ago, Chair Kahele had asked if we would be open to moving our operations down to the second floor. And well, one, we all know that we have an abundance of space on the second floor, and that's been the case, I think, for many years, and trying to look at opportunities to optimize the footprint that we have there. By opening up the third floor, we can basically use that for revenue generation if we choose to give that up as part of our OHA footprint. And we can actually potentially look at not acquiring, but maybe utilizing other space within Nalamakukui rather than the third floor. However, and so this just brings the ELT down with, with our administrative team, which is not a bad idea. I think we would all welcome being able to spend time together. I do think that now that we have a telework policy, we're still going to have an abundance of space because people will be rotating in and out during the work week. So that was the conversation. Certainly, I'm open to it. The ELT is open to it, and but there are some considerations. That elevator must be fixed. So as of now, we have been hoofing it up and down those stairs for months, and those stairs they need to be reconfigured if they are going to be used for if we're going to rent out that space to a new tenant. So there's some other considerations that we need to think about. I did ask Lori to put together a cost benefit analysis of us moving out of the third floor down to the second floor and what that would yield us in terms of cost savings and revenue generation. So I'm hoping to have that hopefully within a week or so that I can share back with trustees.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Kapohana, for that. Any other discussion, trustees? I know we still have a ways to go, waiting for Grace's final numbers before we can really dive into anything of discussion of this nature. Anyone else at this time before? I think we're pretty much done after this.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Stacy.
Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity. And so, Trustee Alapa, excuse me, Chair Alapa, Chair Kahele, both, everybody knew coming in that this was going to be a point in time. We were hoping to be able to distribute out the line by line today. It didn't happen. We will get it to you by this afternoon, and I think we'll be able to have a much more robust conversation. However, Chair, I think getting some guidance from the board would be helpful in determining our numbers that we do want to present out to you. And I think it would be helpful if we know if we're going to separate out the non-OHA CIP requests from our operating budget numbers.
Definitely, when we once again we see those final numbers, it'll be obviously up to us to decide how this is going to be dispersed properly so that everyone's happy. We got to make everyone happy. It's been such a long time since we've been able to make changes, the much needed changes for our department heads to operate at the highest level possible so that we may be able to provide so much more for our people. This has been long overdue, and yes, it's going to take money to do it. And we can't be afraid of utilizing that opportunity to spend that for this time frame. Because if anything, a lot of things could happen along the way. Money's maybe unspent and so forth. So that would be a positive. But we've got to remain optimistic and keep our positive attitude towards this hearings on our budget, because we have so much more that we need to do internally so we can do the best externally. Go ahead.
Yeah, mahalo. I guess for me, I just want to make sure that we're clear. So we're the impetus for moving the non-OHA assets CIP out of the operating budget is to make sure that there's a clear delineation. So I'm not saying we shouldn't do the non-OHA asset CIP. I'm just saying that it should be separated out with its own funding source and policies, guardrails, put around that.
So
And so
let me
that,
understand this. So when you're saying to keep it separate, is it to give the, not appearance, but, to give that clean record?
correct. So OHA operations budget should be purely OHA operations and funds that are required to repair, maintain, purchase OHA assets. Anything that's a non-OHA asset, like a property, a facility, equipment that is owned by a nonprofit, a non-government agency, should be separated out from our budget and should have discretionary funds set aside and then a process for how those funds get applied for and distributed. So that's why we would separate them out. Because again, the numbers in our operations will continue to be skewed by having the non-OHA assets reflected in our operations budget. It would be what I would like to propose to this body is that what we bring back to you for the line by line would be to not have the non-OHA assets included in that. So you have a true reflection of what it cost us to run the OHA business.
Yeah, that was my understanding.
Oh, go ahead, trustee Lindsay.
I said that was my understanding for the separation, so that it would be separate and would have different processes anyway.
Any other discussion?
So Stacy, what are you asking us for approval, and that's why you're repeating it?
Yes, Chair Emerita, only because the non-OHA asset CIP came in through the board budget.
Yep.
And so I'm asking for the consideration to remove those numbers and for the board to take up non-OHA asset CIP as a separate budgetary discussion at a later date, so it doesn't delay the process that we're currently in for OHA specific operations.
Completely
Okay,
understand.
I'd like to move that we do that, separate the non-core CIP from our operating budget. That's what Stacy is asking for right now.
Yes, I understand, but again, we don't have the numbers. We don't have the final numbers for any of us to make the decision right now.
I don't think that's going to matter, actually.
It's not a budget. It's not a budget number issue. It's a process issue.
Yes.
Which affects, I guess, the bottom line.
Okay, so I'm going to take this time to take an adjournment. Okay, so we're not going to make a decision on that just yet. All right. All right, so let's roll call, please. Can I have a motion for adjournment?
Okay. Trustee Akaka,
Aye.
Trustee Akina,
Aye.
Trustee Galuteria,
Right.
Trustee Kahele, Trustee Lindsay, Trustee Souza, Trustee Wahehe, and Chair Lapa.
Yes.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for your participation.